Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hello, Alex.
Welcome,
Hello,
Alex.
Hi.
Welcome, Jazz. Welcome, Sam. There we go. Colin. Kayla. Welcome, Kayla.
Hello, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm eating, so when I'm done eating, I'll put myself on video.
Bonjour, Mr. Gagnon. Bonjour.
Bonjour.
J'ai préparé mon cheveu au moment de la vidéo. Oui, oui.
Moi aussi.
Good. It's good to know everybody's up on their French.
Un peu. Un peu. Plus un peu. See who else is drifting in.
Casey, I was thinking about you after the show.
Yes.
I was
What were
thinking
you thinking?
how I really missed your opinion during the show yesterday. You didn't say much.
I didn't. I said what I needed to.
Oh, okay, that's good. No, I was very domineering yesterday, and I guess that causes fear of what you missed from other people.
Well, thank you for saying that.
Kayla as well was quiet, but she said she didn't have much to say other than a joke, so that was good.
Are we waiting for something special?
I don't know. Are we?
I'm ready.
It's 5 after. I guess let's do a round of check-ins. Where are you right now, this minute? What's living for you?
I'll check in. I'm just looking forward to being here because, it's very isolating. And when I go on Facebook, I'm really overwhelmed by the, not just the misinformation, but the things that are really far fetched that people aren't even questioning themselves. And it's amazing. It's depressing. It's actually depressing. So I'm glad to be here and talk to what I consider rational thinking people with different opinions.
That's not why I come here. I come here for the diversity.
No, forward. I'm in a meeting now.
Anybody want to check in next?
Yeah, I'll check in. As far as personal check-ins, having lots of fun with the grandbaby. I'll say that's a blessing and something that puts a cherry on top of life, which is good things to search for and hold dear. And thought-wise, I've been thinking in relations, a lot of the thinking that I do outside of technology has to do with this group, because usually on Saturdays and Sundays, I participate in the grand illusion of making things better. I don't take part in the grand illusion of saving the world. And I look for models and things that help me understand things a little better, that I can point to, and or a meme, you could say, that could more relay to other people what it is you're trying to talk about. So one of the things I've recently come across, and it came up yesterday, and Jazz didn't know much about it, and he was saying, how can we even have a conversation if I don't know what you're talking about? So there's a certain amount of catching up with what other people know. So that's a bit of a block. And also how to lay down that knowledge trail, that when you do have a conversation with somebody, they know that you've gone through the various pieces of material, be it books or whatever, so that you could actually discuss them. So how do you get on the same page with somebody as far as information? So those are kind of the blocks, and the one that I've come across most recently is this postmodernism. And I see a very interesting quality, that it makes sense on the surface and it sounds fair, and it defines words, kind of redefines and co-ops some words. One of the big ones is equity. It doesn't mean equality. It means spreading everything out so everybody gets the same. So it's not equality of opportunity, it's equality of outcome. And there's some of these things I think that are very important to the GCC to discuss, to understand these different models and ways of thinking. That's part of what I'm trying to do, I guess, armchair philosophy. And I know Alex is very well read on a lot of things, much more read than me. And yesterday, you would get a good joke out of the fact I was trying to say Michael Foucault. And I think I got out Paul Foucault or something, or Pierre or something. But anyway, yeah, it's Michael Foucault I was mentioning, and I put a quote of criticism against him on the GCC. And I also put a video on the GCC page about a religious man interviewing, can't think of the guy's name right now, but he's a professor, and I should look it up. We'll get back to it, but it definitely gets into this nuance between sounding fair and then saying, well, if you want to actually be right and do better, please shut up, listen, and agree with me. There's no other opportunity. And that's kind of the moral logic that they're laying down. And I guess you could say that it seems like it's quite pernicious and it's entering into a lot of different structures. And definitely what we discuss here, power over and hierarchy and systems. And one of the things that's pernicious about it is that, and this is the end of my check-in, is that it doesn't really seem to do anything but be deconstructive. So I don't know, maybe, I don't think we're ready to open up that box yet, but it's definitely somewhere where I'd like to see if we couldn't organize some kind of a talk around that, what postmodernism is, how it relates to our philosophies here of a new way, and does it all just mean revolution in the end and eating away the core? Because it's critical theory. So anyway, I'll just leave it there. It's quite an open, large topic. Jazz didn't know about it, and I'm wondering who else doesn't know about it.
I'll go next. So, personally, I've been working a lot, probably about 10, 12 hours. Luckily, I can work some of those hours from home. But it's a good thing because my kids are away for a month. As far as other things, I've got a lot on my mind. And one particular topic, I don't know if I want to share yet. But we'll see as the day goes on. But that's it. I come here because it makes me happy. I love everyone's brains here, regardless of the agreeing to disagree or disagreeing to disagree or agree. And I am grateful and thankful to be here. Over.
Alex? R? Yes.
See here. You're muted.
Postmodernism is Colin wants to know about that. And I was just researching some stuff about communism. They were saying it every time it's been tried, it failed. It never worked. And so we fall back to our capitalism. And the problem we have, this postmodernist era, is the awakening that's realizing that capitalism has failed too. It's left us in a dire situation. So this is causing a rise in socialism popularity. So this is a postmodern era. But diving into it would be a good idea to go deeper because it changes the narrative. And when anytime something changes the narrative, it's moving it into perspective and shining a better light on it, letting us see what is driving forces, what are they, and how can they be improved or modified. Yeah, so that's one of the things I've been thinking of. And the super self-esteem promotion, raising anything that raises a person's self-esteem higher, has got to be good, right? So this idea of a super self-esteem came to me after looking at some of the replies in the chat session. If we don't learn from our mistakes, if we learn nothing, we fail. So by learning, we win, and that's the answer. If life is a game, play to win. Over.
There is nothing to win. There's only life to experience. This is a very bad attitude we have to win. It leads to all sorts of oddities and bad behavior. Learn, continue, learn how to live together and prosper. I'm complete.
Welcome, Tyra. Alex, G, you want to check in?
Sure. I'm not. I'm kind of just sleepy. I was having a nap. I woke up very early, around 4 in the morning, and I've been working. And I just wanted to see firsthand what unblocking felt like. I've watched a lot of videos, but I don't think I've ever participated. And I just wanted to see what I can contribute. That's it. Over.
I think I
Tyra?
remember you being here maybe 2 or 3 times, but I don't know if it was unblocking specifically.
Tyra, you want to check in? How you doing? Oh, you're on mute.
Hi, I just woke up, so I'm a little bleary-eyed and having a cup of coffee. So cheers, everybody. Nice to see you all. Kayla, Joshua was saying that you're an artist, and that you sit and make things while we're talking. Is that right? Did Joshua get that right?
Yes, I'm a dancer, but yes, I do sit and make things when we're talking.
Yeah. I'll be making mushrooms today, you guys.
Yeah.
Little tiny mushrooms out of wool. Yeah. I think I'm hungover too. I had a little bit to drink yesterday, so I don't know how long I'm gonna last. So good morning, everybody.
Where are you at again?
I'm sorry,
Where are you at again?
I'm in Pasadena.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah,
We're sort of
we're
near.
near. Yeah, you're in Ventura?
Yeah, Ventura County, yes.
Just drove to Santa Barbara yesterday, just to get
Oh,
out of this city, and it was so great. Yeah, it was beautiful. So I waved at you as we drove by.
yes. Next time, stop by.
That's right. We'll have coffee. All right, well, nice to see everybody. I'm gonna mute here so you don't hear me stabbing my little felt mushrooms.
Doug, are you the only one that didn't check in?
I think so. So, I'm a happy camper because our house was chaos. We had emptied my office, which was full of all the extra stuff that didn't fit anywhere else. And my wife had the brilliant inspiration to empty the office and go through everything. Then my son landed, and he had, I don't know, 10 cartons that we were storing for him that he decided to pull out at the same time and empty. So the whole living space had just sort of like turned into this chaotic nightmare. And I'm like really attached these days to order, like to things being clear and open and in their right place. And so it really sort of put me out of my mind for about a week. And we're finally back to that. So I'm feeling a lot more settled and comfortable. And it's funny, I've had conversations with, I think, 3 or 4 different people over the last few days where, talking about COVID, and I shared that we're not realistically, earliest possibility for getting back to a place of no thought about COVID is like 3rd quarter of next year, like a year from now, earliest. And actually had them agree, which was a first. And several of them are, shall we say, more Trumpster centered than rationally centered. And And I was like, I took that as something hopeful, that there was a expanding rationality beginning to present itself, like more people making more sense. And Stacy, I know what you shared. I get that too, like this streak of insanity that's taken as normalcy. That's just, it's so striking in its irrationality that it just sort of takes your breath away. But I think that's a shrinking phenomena in terms of number of people, and I think this ties in, Colin, to your postmodern thing, because postmodernism is really rooted in that, disconnect from any kind of objective realities or truths. Everything is subjective and individual, and let your freak flag fly, regardless of how rational, irrational it is. But I do see, like, what seems to be a felt dawning awakening on a presence level by more people that, even 2 months ago just were patently grounded in alternative facts and alternative realities and dismissive of what's going on. And I find that heartening. It's sort of it's not a celebratory heartening, because it's in the face of us, heading toward hundreds of thousands of deaths rather than tens of thousands or thousands of deaths. So the reality that I think is bringing people back to ground is horrendous. But the fact that people are coming back to ground sort of is providing, for me, is at least providing like a sense of hope that things might swing back to some measure of rational normalcy in the scheme of the world. So I'm feeling that. But I'm not feeling particularly blocked about anything. So that's a good thing. And with that, I'm complete. So Colin had an explicit block he put on the table. Kayla has a hidden secret block that she put on the table without putting it on the table. First, does Kayla want to reveal so we could pick who goes first? And second, does anybody else have anything they'd like to put on the table? Alex.
Later, I'll save it up for later, because it's an interesting thing, an interesting phenomenon.
Stacy?
Well, first, I just want to say that my check-in went beyond COVID, because what I'm actually seeing is like the crossroads of all these different crazy things. So what I suspect is happening, based on what I'm seeing in some of the more extreme groups, is this whole idea of human trafficking, which is being put out in a way that not only connects to Q and makes the whole Q conspiracy more realistic, because we've heard it from different parts. So what I'm seeing is really insidious, and it's hard to tell how orchestrated it is and how much it's just a perfect storm. So I just wanted to say that. I'm interested in what Colin was saying, because part of what I have a whole problem with labeling things to begin with. So for example, I would much prefer somebody start a conversation by saying, I don't know, have you, there's this stream of thought that believes A, B, and C, instead of just saying, have you ever heard of whatever? It's just more straightforward, and it leaves less room for misunderstanding. Because if I'm actually saying, you know, some people believe that this, it's different than if I just give you a label and have you interpret what that label means. Because, so I guess one of the blocks that I'm having is that I feel that too often we look at one snapshot and we make a whole interpretation based on one snapshot instead of all these different pieces coming together. And it's frustrating for me to watch, because I see it happening just in conversations with people. And I know that if in small groups we can't get that right, there's no way it's going to scale. So that's my block. So I'm happy to talk about any of the other blocks, because mine follows.
You know, part of the mechanism behind that is something I've been spending a lot of time thinking about, which is each one of us as a human being are actually these unbelievably complex and powerful, multifaceted energy systems. And our configuration changes from moment to moment to moment to moment. Like the spiritual and the emotional and the energetic and the cognitive, like all of our experiential dimensions, both the ones that are commonly recognized and shared by everybody on an awareness level, and all the ones that we currently don't even have language for or recognize in our cultural frame, that all those things are going on as living dimensions of our beingness in real time and configuring in real time. It's this massive, complex thing, and our state of being. And what you're talking about with the labels and naming things and roles and all of those words that attach to those things are actually these massive switches. They're triggers. I'm beginning to see them that way, where you use a particular word and you literally reconfigure all of the people instantaneously on the receiving end. And it's a huge energetic thing, shifting, like switching in real time, that can happen like in this group. Use a word and everybody literally shifts programmatically into a different place, a different setup. And I hate to use configuration because it makes it machine-like, but it's the best analogy I can come up with, where it's like reconfiguring everybody.
How about like a flock of birds that shift?
Yeah, and we're doing that to each other on a steady state, ongoing, real-time basis, with everything we say and do. And so, you know, my favorite example is, you know, coming into a Zoom and somebody going, and here's Doug, he's facilitating today. And literally everybody going, ka-chunk, 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 and all of these reconfigurations happen, and everybody sits back and goes, okay, I don't have to think anymore. I have no responsibility for what happens here anymore. I just have to wait for the facilitator to tell me where to go and how high to jump and when to speak and when not to speak and when a response is. And it's just literally this autonomic programmed thing. And I go into all of these situations where I go, can't use that word, and people go, what do you mean you can't use that word? Of course you can use that. I'm like, no, you can't use that word. The minute you use that word, you kick everybody offline who's in attendance. Like they're no longer 100% present and involved and engaged and connected and being here. You just let everybody off the hook. And I'm in the, these days, all I'm doing is I'm in the being business, creating containers and inviting people to reconnect with what it means to be fully, you know, to find their voice, to step up, to step in, to contribute, to co-create whatever is happening. And so it's a really big thing that we just have no consciousness or attach any significance to that effect. And I'm complete.
I just want to say that I agree with everything that you said, and I do think it's a really big thing.
I want to add that the old paradigm which uses money, financial system, is what needs to change. And I think the new paradigm would be manner. A way the algorithm looks at the data and awards people their share, their percentage of the pie, so to speak. That's one aspect. But I don't know how these people are going to offend who turn their nose away from technology. There's a big movement to go away from the cities onto the land and live in a kibbutz or a commune, a new earth eco-village, and they can still go online. I encourage them to get computers and satellite dishes and solar panels, because the more connected we are with the AI, the better we can use the machine language to find solutions quicker. Over.
Tyra?
I just had a thought when you're talking, Alex, about people wanting to go off the grid and simplify life. And my family lived off the grid for over 18 years, and they did it really well. My mom and dad were incredible off-gridders, and it's hard work, you know, and they lived in an area where other people would think, let's go live off the grid. And they last about a season, you know, when things get really rough. And I know, and my folks would laugh because they'd see them come in and they're all excited and they drag some kind of trailer in there and set up. And then, you know, they freeze to death in the winter. They realize that indoor plumbing is a really awesome thing. So the fantasy of living off grid, and also I was recently watching a program of survivalists that go out, you know, and it's competition. Let's see who lasts the longest. And they're all looking for most of them are looking to deal with trauma. Many of them PTSD, all of this, and they sit out there in the woods and they get to know themselves. And what they find out is everything they wanted is right back home, right back at the place they left. They end up all circling around to everything I have is right here. And I find that very fascinating, that we feel like we have to run away, you know, change the location and everything will be different. And really it's not at all, especially if you go off grid. You're only making your situation a lot harder. And I also wanted to speak to your conversation, Doug, that you had with a friend. And you were excited because you could actually find some common ground over COVID, rather than that division that's been happening in America. Empathy. Doug, do you find that when you are talking to your friends that have a different political view from you, do you find that it's a topic of empathy, a lack of empathy? And it's not until those folks lose somebody from COVID to where they go, oh, so I lost somebody. There's a pandemic, you know, or it's not my kid, not my problem. this is the thing I've noticed in the division in our country is half of us want to take care of all the children of the world. The other half say, not my kid, not my problem. That's your problem. You raised that little beast, or you're the one who brought that little child across the border. You're the one who put him in, not my problem. So I find that it's an empathy, which then comes down to, is it like a birth defect to be, to lack that empathy? Like I just find that interesting, and I've really seen it in the last 4 years, is a difference in empathy. And then that attitude of, hey, I'm going to just leave my country. If Trump gets reelected, I'm moving to Canada. I'm going to go live off the grid. That'll solve all the problems, rather than, hey, this is my home and I'm going to fight for it and make sure that my values are represented as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
I'd like to stir the pot a little bit and see if I can blend a couple of ideas with Jazz saying that there is no winning and you saying fight for it. Do you think when you fight for it, you win something, or are you, like, is there something common between those? Because I think it is very deep. And I heard parents say, I think it was Eric Weinstein said, no, Brett Weinstein, him and his wife have a podcast, The Dark Horse, and he said that he hopes that his children go through enough tragedy so that they can at least be funny, right? But no more. So, there's a lot to be said for people who've lost things or have gone off grid, and then reflect on what is important. That's, it's a very deep bridging thing, and people who are not coming from that place can get very tied up in compartmentalization and I guess make claims and try to rule the world. I don't know. So is there anything to the winning, Jazz, in this situation, do you think?
Well, Stacy raised her hand, so let's do Stacy and then Jazz if you want to answer. Welcome, Dove.
Yeah, I just want to push back a little bit on the idea of empathy, because I definitely agree about the lack of empathy. However, I want to say that sometimes it just appears that there's a lack of empathy because we're looking at the situation differently than the person we think has none. So, for example, I know certain people that are, in the non-mask wearing crowd, and I can't say they have no empathy because they're not looking at the same thing I'm looking at. So in their mind, they really are worried about other people, but they're worried about something different. And they believe something different about the situation that they're being faced with. So I may not agree with them, but I can't say they don't have empathy because we're not looking at the same thing. And I think that happens a lot. And that's, again, why I'm against lumping people into groups or ideas altogether, because there's a lot of variation within those containers. Over.
Jazz, you want to respond to Colin's question?
I have a question for Colin. He believes he's being rational by taking ideas and lumping them together and then asking somebody else to make a comment. I did try to explain this yesterday, but that's really not that good to do. And the question I have for him is not just those particular items he's mentioned, but what is it that's important to you? Now, I think about things and I look for signals, and I'm very careful to analyze signals coming out of another person. And you've never mentioned anything about your family life, whether you've been married, you had children, divorced, what. And there are no signals coming out at all. There are no commonalities that I can look at and say, except yesterday I made the commonality of talking about your teenage years and how we were learning in the teenage years section of our lives. and retain that learning mechanism. So I also put a post, it was quite late today, in Messenger from somebody who got something out of a Buddhist teacher, priest actually. And this preacher gave advice to this person who was overthinking on how to get out of overthinking, which resonated with me extremely well. And you came to mind. And it's applicable to everybody, really. When you're thinking about a scenario or several scenarios, you take a scenario and you think it as far as it goes, and then you ask the question, then what? And you do that to everything. Now, I did the same thing, but in a slightly different way, many years ago. And I was looking for the best fit answer. There's the problem. What's the best fit answer? Then I moved on from that to what answer fits all situations? Is it yes, no, good enough, not good enough? Is there a single word that I can use? Noddy fashion. The nodding dog fashion. But that scenario which is in Messenger on the GCC Messenger, I think that's an excellent one as well to use. So when you start looking at these scenarios, take it to the end. Then what? Somebody was doing such and such a thing. Then what? And you find that it, like I found, it's convergent. All experiences, everything in life leads towards one certain thing. And it started from one certain thing. But that's me overthinking now. It's for you to find out what is it that's important to you. Is being helpful to others important to you? If somebody's child is in dire straits, is that important to you? Is everybody important to you? Would you like to make everybody more important than yourself? So you really have to question all those things by doing whatever scenario you want to do. Question everything. Now, postmodernism, as far as I remember, died a long time ago. I haven't heard that phrase for decades. And most of these phrases, they're fluid. They come in and somebody puts a meaning around them, and a few years later they've changed. Catches everybody on the hop. The Conservative Party is no longer the Conservative Party. It's more liberal, and the Liberal parties become conservative. Then they stick with their name, but they don't even know they've shifted position. There was a famous essay about this, which did the rounds some years ago, and the internet has killed a lot of these sayings, which probably is a good idea. But if we start a custom that is suitable for our circumstances today, and argument's sake, 100 years later, it's still ongoing, but it's no longer needed. And you ask the people, why are you doing this? We don't know. When did it start? We don't know. Why are you doing this? We don't know. So you ask those questions, or I ask those questions, and the people will become annoyed. Literally, they will become extremely annoyed. When I started researching Sikhi, because I was, like you, very fed up of hearing the same sort of answers. I thought, I want to know for myself. So I did the research. And there were a lot of things different today than when it was being set up. So when I ask people, why are we doing this? They don't know. And it comes down to, don't rock the boat, just stay with the flow. And as I said yesterday, that is sort of the first few steps leading toward what you were saying, corruption. Corruption of an ideal or an idea or a situation, and nobody knows. And they continue the process just to be nice. And that is an underlying rule everybody uses, because they don't want people to think, well, he's not nice. That's not nice. So are you willing to rock the boat? Are you willing to go into that space where people will say that about you, be it for a short time or a long time? You're not nice. We don't like you. Somebody will say, I like you. You seem to be honest and forthright. Very few of those. It might not even be the truth. They might just be saying that just to be on your side or appear to be on your side, appeasing. So in the end, the conclusion is that all life is an illusion. All life is based on lies, human lies. What do you want out of it? Where do you want to fit in? Arm yourself with the armaments that make you fit in best wherever you want to be. Are you going to help everybody regardless? And also when we look at children, I'm going to say something which I think everybody should know, but the education system is not very old. It's not even 100 years old yet. It's about 75 years old. Children didn't have education. Only the rich people's children had education. The rich have always been the rulers. When a poor person became rich, his children went to school or private tuition. We're only the fourth, maybe fifth generation. And the generation gap has closed from 35 years, it's down to about 20 years, which is good. And more of the childhood learning programs is being posted out to so-called people that we give permission to, for them to teach things to our children. And one of my misgivings when my children were being raised was that they were getting ideas from other children, from their parents, and bringing them home. You know, where the heck are they getting them from? People in multicultural societies want to have education systems which are more suited to their lifestyle, to their belief systems. So the Christians, the Catholics, the Sikhs, the Muslims, they all want their own different schools. In the past, the churches had schools attached to the place of worship. But today, it's government legislation. You must go to a common school. And if you don't send your children there for 3 odd days or whatever it is, we want to know why, or you pay a fine. But the important point here I'm making is that the upbringing of children is becoming more and more communal. It may end up that it disappeared. Is it becoming boring now, Colin? Oh, you moved, you shifted over. Somewhere along the line, we either go
No,
to the system that the rich people are using, which is you put the children in boarding school, or you keep them at, everybody has the same system, keep them at home, and you have a school a reasonable distance, less than 3 miles away from home, which is 3 miles is about 45 minutes walking distance at a brisk pace. So these systems, when we build cities, they're looked at, and all the amenities are put within walking distance previously, and now it's within a reasonable car driving distance. And they say it's about 1 hour's drive, which could be as much as 60 miles away. In modern traffic, that would take you 2 or 3 hours. Really, we are at a crossroads now, where we are, for the first time since the industrial age started, we're looking at how we set up these systems, how they're working, and what are we going to do in the future. Do you want to be in on that decision-making system? I had an email Friday. I live in the county of West Midlands, and the West Midlands County transport system is making some changes, and they've sent out questionnaires, and they've asked for questionnaires to be filled in, sent off. Any other comments, or do you want to come down and talk with us? Are you willing, like I am, to go to the meetings, which I have been doing for a long time? That includes things like the hospitals, how they're set up, the ambulance systems, the police systems. All these systems are set up, and they are changing, they are evolving. And if you want society to change in whatever direction you think is fit, you have to go and make your point. It's not static, it's not postmodernism, it's not conservative, it's not communism. It's a mixture, it's an ad hoc mixture, and nobody knows what they're talking about. But they all want to appear to know what they're talking about. I'll have to leave it at that. The little one's popped in. I'm so glad, actually. Later. Oh, she wants to show you something. There we are. She's got a rash on her elbow, and she just had some cream put on. I'll leave it at that. I'm complete for now.
Hi, Sam. You know, I liked, I think I've talked about it before. I love the narrative that we all have, and it kind of goes back to what Stacy and Jazz were saying, that it's that narrative that brings us together. And also, sorry, my thought just kind of went out the window. It rolled into a snowball and then kept on going down the hill without me. Let's see, where was I with that? Oh, it's an illusion. So we each have our own narratives. Like what Stacy was saying about empathy in response to my remark. Yeah, Stacy, you know, I have my narrative, and sometimes it's hard to put myself in other people's shoes and to truly understand. And then I form a description, you know. I think that's just human nature. We have to form that narrative in order to kind of propel ourselves forward and understand what's happening. But that illusion part of me thinking, oh, that person doesn't have any empathy. Whereas I just may not understand how they express empathy. They may express it differently than I do. And again, it's all about the story that we're telling ourselves and everybody else. Like Jazz is saying, like, oh, if I send my son to a Catholic school, then they're going to have the same values. Whereas, you know, maybe that kid got abused in Catholic school and it didn't turn out to be anything about values. So I love the human narrative. I love how as a species, we have to have a story to describe in order to move forward. And I think it's interesting that what Jazz just said about wanting to know about Colin, it's like we all want this narrative in our minds so that we can figure out how to move forward in that conversation. I hope that made some sense. That's all I have to say. Thank you. One more thing. Unblocking our own sense, like for me, it's really hard to go in to conversations, political conversations especially, to hear someone else's side of the story, because I already have a really strong opinion. I can't say I'm mature enough to really go in and sit down with a Trump supporter right now and really truly listen to them, which is my shortcoming, obviously, because that's where I'm blocked. You know, I get blocked. Like, I like descriptions. I mean, if somebody has a bumper sticker on their car, it's like all I need to know about them and just a few short words, you know. I love bumper stickers because then I already know what that human being is advertising to the world. And I find that kind of delightful. And of course, they represent a whole bunch of other things. So I'm not very evolved when it comes to, I'm super snarky, sarcastic, and I can be judgmental, even though I really work on that. But I think that's my nature, and I have to really fight against the bumper stickers and realize that that person might be more than just this little tagline they've put on their car. Okay, thank you.
I've been very good, Sam, and I've been not taking what Jazz just said that you missed personally. And I'd like to hear if you've got anything to contribute, if you know what's going on yet. I tried to include Jazz and it didn't work well, so I'll see if I can include you and see if it works well.
Sorry, I've been for 45 minutes doing other things around the house, so I've not actually caught much of this other than Tyra's last 2 or 3 minutes. So that's all the context that I have. So I don't want to speak out of context here.
Well, you can watch back and be proud of me, unless I mess it up in the next 20 minutes. No, I do think there is a conflict, and we tried to attack it yesterday, and I'm learning more and more about this difference and how not to take personally what somebody says.
Since you asked me, could you try using a word other than attack?
I think you're right. I think I was characterized as doing something bad and wrong, unhelpful. So I was accused or criticized, I guess would say. And I don't mind criticized. Attack, you're probably right, it's a bit much. It didn't feel like an attack. It did feel like a snowball to the head. So, you know.
Anybody been following the debate on the science versus religion would know about the odd appearance of strange matter in the vacuum, which we used to think there was nothing there, but now we know that's full of stuff, and that's a peculiar aspect of the scientific process.
There was a really interesting posting, which I hopefully didn't lose because I didn't finish reading the whole thing. But it was basically a guy who's positing, well, he's really focusing in on this idea that consciousness, the concept of consciousness is connection to the physical manifest universe. Like that nexus where those two things meet. And the scientific, Hoyle, at least up to the present, is that consciousness has no effect on the physical universe. So it doesn't require being factored in, basically. That in terms of the laws of the physical universe, in terms of the realm that physics covers, in terms of the tangible and the concrete versus this thing called consciousness, and by applying mathematics, I don't necessarily buy into the formulaic construct that he arrived at, but posited the idea that there may be a consciousness in the universe based on an application of mathematics. And in my sort of experienced frame these days, there's just this whole massive domain of intangible, ephemeral, energetic stuff going on that science doesn't touch. And it's not to say that I have a judgment on science for not touching that. That's where people tend to go. They go, well, if you say that, then you're anti-science and you're knocking science and you're blaming science or you're minimizing or marginalizing science and blah, blah, on and on and on. And I'm like, no, I'm not. This is an additive thing, not a competitive thing. But there is just literally a universe of energetic, I would almost suggest subcognitive reality that we don't have language for, we don't recognize, we don't acknowledge the existence of, because it's not physically manifest in some tangible way, however big or small, in terms of quantum theory or general relativity and everything in between. But and the idea that the universe may have a kind of consciousness as a function of density of interconnectedness and sort of energy flows out of that interconnectedness, that's of the essence of consciousness. And the idea that that's a one-directional thing, that the physical manifest universe flows to consciousness, but nothing flows from consciousness that affects the physical universe. And I'm like, no. I'm becoming very, very aware of the sort of machinery and mechanism of how I create my reality moment to moment, literally, in just an unbelievably elaborate, complex array of energy flows and words and actions and thoughts and feelings and sensings. And that moment to moment, I'm synthesizing all of that in real time. And everybody else is doing that, each individually. And I change a variable or I change a choice or decision point in any one of the facets of my perceptual, sensorial, emotional, spiritual frame, and it changes the world I see, I feel, I experience. And so to say consciousness doesn't affect or flow, have an impact on the world is sort of insane to me. No matter how good your, math calculus is and your translation of, physical quanta into mathematical expression and all this fancy dancy juggling that he's doing. But it's like, you're missing the point. And I think that's the same essence that jazz, after a really long way around the horn, was getting to with Colin, which is, what in your heart of heart and mind of minds are you looking for? What do you want for you on a feeling sensing level? All this head stuff is in service to giving you what on an experiential, personal, emotional level. That's like essential in the conversation. It's not the only thing. It doesn't overshadow or eclipse the other stuff, but it's an important leg of the stool. And I'm complete. Yes, Sam.
You're mute, Sam. Sam, you're mute.
Okay, sorry. 2 points, thank you. The main point I would like to do is to offer a different interpretation of mathematics, which I think leads to a misconception and I believe a misuse of the term. But before that, I'd like to offer another opinion, which is that science doesn't decide anything. Scientists do, and people who fund scientists decide things, but science itself doesn't decide. If there are phenomena of consciousness and unconsciousness, in my opinion, they are perfectly valid realms for scientific inquiry. And in fact, many people have done so. To ignore that is just, well, partially ignorance, It's done outside this country. This country may not be funding it a lot, but it's done elsewhere. So that's the first relatively minor point. The main point I'd like to make is that whenever you try to understand relationships, every one of those different statements you make about relationships and relations is an expression of mathematics. That's all it is. Mathematics is not recipes, it's not cookbooks, it's not, how you manipulate symbols. The symbols help express relationships. So you can have loose relationships, specific relationships, many ordered relationships. Those are all fine. So, mathematics has evolved to the point where it can express many things. And how we use mathematics is a reflection of our understanding of those phenomena. So if we begin to understand, let's say, consciousness, we can use very, very rough operators like less than, greater than, affects, implies, influenced by, all those kinds of things are operators you can use in relationship expressions. As we understand more, we can express more with more specificity, more granularity, more semantics, more precision. So none of that is to say that mathematics is incapable of understanding a phenomenon. It's that we are not yet able to use any language, including mathematics, to understand those phenomena. We do use English. We do use Hindi. We do use Chinese. And to that extent, there are rough relationship operations being expressed. Those are perfectly valid to be translated to mathematics. And indeed, people do that. So I'm only making a statement here, not to try and convince anybody here, but just to go on the record that that notion of mathematics will get you closer to an understanding of what mathematics really can do. So to mischaracterize it is to mischaracterize it, in my opinion, and throw away the value of it.
Thank you for that.
Anybody still need to know what science is?
Yeah, go ahead. Explain what science is.
No hope for you, Jazz.
No.
Psychology.
You made a statement, and I explained what
I've taken
science
you
is
as far as
to
I can
me
take you, Jazz.
yesterday.
I've taken you as far as I can take you. I'm sorry.
The science of human nature.
I explained what it is to me yesterday. Sam has explained what it is to him. And yes, it would be good to hear what is it to you, Colin.
Well, I think when we were talking with Glenn, I said science was a tool. And I said, I'm looking for models. And what's important to me is understanding. My context here is not about my personal life. It may be for other people. So if you need my personal life context, contact me one-on-one, ask questions. Don't do it here. I have no problem in opening up to you, but if I think I'm going to tell you private things about me and you're going to come on here and say them, then I wouldn't appreciate that, because I know the contract here is everything's recorded. So there are some conversations I think have to be one-on-one to get some nuances of somebody with certain boundaries. We all have different boundaries, right? Different norms. So yeah, what's important to me is understanding. When you put a post up today from the, I don't know, Enlightened Woman group, which was something about, the woman said she was a tiger, and she says, I always win or else I learn from it, right? And then so Alex come on and said something about most important thing to him is if you're going to try, then win. And then you came on and said winning wasn't important right off the beginning of the show. So I thought this was something important to you I could learn from and understand. But apparently you took it the wrong way and thought I was provocative and cross-pollinating ideas. So my question to you was, what do you mean by winning? And when I think it was Tira was talking about having to fight for her area, when people go away and go off grid, they realize what's important was always where they were a lot of times. They start to appreciate what's missing and what's lost. So I'm just wondering what this word win means with you. And I'll end it there. I had a lot more things to say, but Sam's definitely chewing there. Thank you, Sam.
May I know I just went very
Yep.
recently. Colin, if I may, just wanted to ask you a single, very short question. And I was wondering, whether or not you had a short, concise answer to that, because I didn't think that the winning was part of this science notion. Just
No,
myself.
I'm going back to
And
the
then
previous
secondly,
point.
before
That's
you
the
actually
previous point.
respond,
He's asking
is
about science 3 or 4 times, and I think it's kind of silly a question myself. I'm not answering because I think
okay, in my opinion, use of the word silly is not a constructive way to carry this conversation. Just
Well,
like, other words that sometimes show up. And just to set a little bit of context, part of my and hopefully others' objective in having the discussion we had yesterday, I stated, and I'm not sure it was universally accepted, that part of what I wanted to see was a way to handle this disagreement, either whether you characterize it as science versus religion, or whether it's bullying, or whether it's just a jazz Colin dynamic. I would just like to understand a way so that we could actually then not let it distract and defocus future conversations. And I believe it is still doing so. That's from my brief observation here.
I think you're right.
So my understanding is that conversation yesterday was probably insufficient. It probably needs more.
I agree.
So for context, next Saturday, we've decided to use the disagreeing well topic for next Saturday. In other words, how do we disagree well? So just 2 observations. 1, yesterday wasn't enough. 2, I didn't hear a direct response to just Winder's question to you. Over.
Okay, thanks, Sam. Yeah, the science thing is an ongoing question. And in fact, I can just say I'm not a scientist. So go ask a scientist what it means. What it means to me is basically it's a tool that we use to understand what's going on. It has predictive powers. And as Sam said, science is not a thing that decides. Science is a tool we use, and it can be manipulated for good and bad. And I find when a lot of people criticize science, they're criticizing the human manipulation more than they're criticizing what science is. Because if you truly know what science is, you would know it doesn't have a human opinion. So how could it be against you? How could it be a problem? It's what people do with it that's the problem. I think that's what 90% of the conversation is, about people, not about science. The conversation between science and religion, I don't want to have in this particular group, in this space. I would be glad to have it in a different space, just because I think it pollutes the quality of this space. If the conversation actually is about religion, then sure. But if we just want to bring up that to talk about, I think that's kind of a red herring. So it has to be within context. You weren't here, Sam, but I did extend a fig leaf to Jazz to have him have the opportunity to explain what he meant by his 2 or 3 now mentionings of winning in the last few hours. And it must mean something to him. So I am open to learn. But again, I think I was taken off on the wrong light and thinking that I'm criticized. He said that I did a very bad thing by trying to relate what he means by winning to what Tara might mean by winning and fighting for what's important. I thought it was a valid question. I thought it could go in many different serendipitous directions that I didn't expect. I wasn't presupposing the answer at all. But I think Jazz definitely has a trigger when it comes to me asking him questions. So there is a problem there. So perhaps if I want to find something out from Jazz, I could ask Doug to ask Jazz, which is really sad. But anyway, I feel that way.
Okay, I've got this triangle with religion, science, and politics. And I think that if we drop the science out of the debate, out of the narrative, and focus on politics and religion, we might make further progress.
Well, I've changed the religion and politics to postmodernism because I see it as the new religion that I'm learning about. And it has this pernicious nature of sounding fair until you actually see what it is when it's been implemented into an institution and has teeth behind it. So it's okay for us to all have opinions, but when you have to follow my opinion and you're in a catch-22 where you want to make reparations, but you cannot because it's a lose-lose situation for you because you're a white privileged male or you can't understand about women or you have no whatever the problem is, they just go into this wonderful world of what Doug is talking about and twist it to make it into a law. So when Doug's talking about his sense of being and building his reality from all the complexity around him in the moment, that's the way he does it. But if he says, and everybody has to do that or else you're an original sinner and you're going to lose your job, or, it's kind of interesting. The talk I posted today it was a religious person and 2 atheists talking about this postmodern problem and its perniciousness on religion, actually attacking religion, and it's going to gut religion because it's going to go into religion and infect it so that, for Catholics, they're going to have women priests now, and they're just going to make it. I guess the problem is they're not looking for equality of outcome. They're looking for equality to make everybody the same. So they don't use competencies and I hear the talk here that scares me, like about needing a revolution or to completely get rid of the old way of doing things, get rid of the old hierarchy. Money's bad, capitalism's bad. These are all, I think, very ignorant statements. It's much, much more nuanced than that. Depends who you are, where you are, what you're trying to achieve. So nuance is completely lost a lot of times. And I think that's a common complaint I've had, that I call bullshit on a lot of generalities. And I was not calling bullshit on Jazz today. I was actually truly asking him what he meant by winning. So even if I call bullshit, I don't call bullshit, I kind of get painted the same way, which is back to why I think we still need to solve this more, Sam, because there has to be, if you're going to have a conversation at that level, it might have to be between the 2 people themselves and get more of a standpoint so that they can actually play nice with others. Because if they're going to make the conversation all about their difference, I think that's why I try to parking lot these things, not because I'm trying to derail it or avoid it. Everybody's opinion is worth discussing, but is it type of thing that postmodernist type of authoritative creeping into what is fair, what is right, and murking up the world of understanding? It almost feels cultish that, And it's obvious. Some obvious ones are like, if you're a white male, just run away from any conversation as soon as you hear the word equity, because it's going to tear you apart left and it's going to tear you apart right. There's nothing you can do to, in the strict sense of this postmodernist thinking. And I think it's coming. So that's why I've changed this science and religion. I think religion is just one example of closed-minded thinking. Science is open-minded, but science isn't everything. Science is just what we can grasp a hold of and try to make predictions from. Like last time I did this, it worked. If it's wrong, we'll accept it. Science doesn't presuppose the answer. It hypothesizes a possibility and then it tests it. So science, I think one of the things that it has more than some of these other ways of thinking is science does not use circular reasoning, where a lot of other things do. And they're trying to fill gaps, where science fill gaps between two known points, where I think science is coming from what we know now and trying to move out further. So science is trying to explore unknown, trying to make sense of things in a way that's reproducible with evidence, emotion and human experience and sociology and all that stuff. It's kind of a whole different world of animals and what animals want. And I wouldn't expect to come across a group of animals in the wild and presuppose how they're going to act, as opposed to another group of animals. And we are a human race of what we call animals. And we come from mushrooms, in case anybody doesn't know. That's my evolutionist joke. If you don't think we come from mushrooms, then we're in totally different worldviews. And what do we do about that? Does it even matter in the conversation is a good question. So anyway, I'll be done with that. Thanks.
I got a good answer for the good question. Where we come from doesn't matter. What matters is where we're going. And the reason I say that is because whether it was mushrooms or some other fungi, or even not a fungi at all, maybe a lichen or a bacteria, it doesn't matter. We got here, and we should be thankful that we got here, however what we got here. And the DNA's got a code in it. The code comprises 4 letters, A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4. And that sequence, that code is sequenced and copied, and it delivers the right enzymes and proteins to create life. Where does the codes come from? Codes come from intelligence. Over.
That's debatable, but definitely Sam was saying that, I think, and in that video I was watching, they did come to the conclusion that it's all about coexistence. And that's what Sam's about in barn raising, I think, is one of our main tenets that we're trying to work towards. And it is about the journey from here to there. And so I don't like it when I hear people say, oh, it doesn't matter, don't even bother the journey because capitalism's got us screwed. Like, we need nuance less than we need dichotomies. And I did note that Jazz didn't jump on you when you said mushrooms didn't matter, and he jumped on me. But that's another thing. Good.
So I feel like I'm going to personally express dissension from this history doesn't matter perspective. I think that's throwing away 99% of our accumulated experience in history, which is unnecessary. There's a lot of value there. So I formally dissent to this expression that history doesn't matter. Over.
Where did you hear that?
I heard Alex say where we come from doesn't matter.
Yeah, I was talking about the origin of life sort of thing. If it's a religion or if it's a evolution, it doesn't matter. We're here.
I think it matters to express your worldview on, on that type of topic, but is it in context with another conversation needs to be warranted? And I'm saying with Jazz, I brought up mushrooms don't matter, and then he jumped on me. I never got to finish my sentence. It doesn't matter only in as much in our conversation to determine that my worldview says that I believe and could probably go and study with some amount of time and maybe reprove this whole genetics and buy the equipment and take the course. But I can take on faith, you could say, which I don't like that word. So I could believe that the scientists aren't lying to me, that, from Darwin and the genetics and this stuff is so. And if you follow it through logically, that means that we would have had ancestors that were mushrooms. People who say that's not true are in a different worldview than me. And that was the only point I was trying to make. The fact we come from mushrooms is extremely important. But is it important in the conversation of saying, do you have the same worldview as me or not? I don't think so. It's just one point.
I always, I really don't like when we set up this whole science versus religion thing, because I think just the question, has a whole bias to it. But what Sam said, I think, is really important. And I'm starting to think that maybe the greatest advantage science has in the first place is that it depends on math. There's no, well, it's a soft number 8 or a loud number 8. There's just a number 8. And I've often thought that I wish we could have that kind of objectivity. Well, again, objectivity means something different to everybody. I wish we could have that kind of definitive value assigned to individual pieces in our communications. I'm complete. Sam?
Since this is such a big point now in unblocking and it also in barn raising, and it looks like almost every conversation I'm involved in GCC, I'm going to venture my own opinion on science. And it's not the textbook definition. The textbook definition, which I've given before, I think I still hold extremely strongly. But the way I look at science is, it's that which I build confidence, quote unquote, belief in, which will lead me to the least disappointment. In other words, if I rely on something that has been proven by multiple observations, perhaps billions of observations, okay, it's likely that the billionth plus one is not going to disappoint me if I actually accept those billion data points that lead me to that particular conclusion. It is my own fault if I misinterpret that data. The data doesn't tell me anything, it's how I interpret it. So if someone says, oh, believe this, and they've got stories of, their aunt and their uncle, and, they believed it and good things happened to them, then that's fine, that's 2 data points. But if there's a third data point that says this person believed that and ended up in disappointment, then I'm gonna put that lower in that stack of things that I believe in. So what the scientific method is trying to lead us to is that set of things that we have high confidence in, that if we accept, that if we build into our living, our tools, our practices, our technologies, we're likely to be disappointed the least. In other words, we can accept things about flow and build airplanes and believe in that in such a way that we minimize, the times we're disappointed, i.e. people die. If people believe something else that someone tells them from a top of a mountain somewhere, by pounding on a book, I'll accept it. If it has never led to disappointment, I will. I guarantee it. It's that I'm trying to juggle and balance. Okay. So this is how I'm actually looking at science. Science takes a method which tries to disprove what it's saying. In other words, it's trying to eliminate that opportunity for disappointment. And by doing so proactively, it's helping the rest of us avoid that disappointment. What other practice does that? Over.
Okay. What other practice does that? So,
Jazz, hold on one sec. Tyra had raised her hand. I want to make
oh,
sure.
sorry, Tyra.
And
Oh, that's okay, Jazz. I just have a quick tag on this. And what I'm hearing when it comes to the science and the religion, it comes down for me to one word, which is curiosity. So does it really matter who's right, who's wrong. It's that as humans, we are curious and we are willing to look into these different aspects of our experience in this life. And so if we all look at it from the standpoint of curiosity, for me, that takes the sting out of the disagreements. Like, I'm right, you're wrong, science is this, religion is that. What it all comes down to is, are you curious? Are you willing to ask questions? Do you want to explore and find out more about life? Are you willing to take a idea and collect data? Are you willing to have faith? To me, it all comes down to, am I curious? And that's just for me. It's curiosity. Over.
Inquisitive.
Dove and then Jazz, if that's okay, just in service to spreading around the opportunity.
So I feel like I'm interrupting in the middle of something that took you days to build, and just a few thoughts. One is about disappointment. What about people who say Jesus never disappointed me, right? So it's not really about disappointing. On this topic of science, I think also, science depends on scientists which are human and have their political viewpoints. There was once the science of, I don't remember the exact name, cryogenics, like the science of how your crane, the shape of your crane regarding to how Jewish you are, if you want, which was a legitimate science in the service of the politics and the thought of the culture that did it. And there's a lot of examples of science like that. And currently there are people who sound very convincing, I assure you, because I listen to them, that are called flat earthers. And their logic can't be broken. You look at it from outside and you look at science from inside. So that's my 2 cents about the science, the strength of science. But again, I feel like I'm coming into a conversation / conflict that is deeper than my footnote. So with this, I'll pass the stick to someone else.
Jazz?
Well, my only adage is that it doesn't really matter which discipline we're looking at, in that, for argument's sake, if discipline A, which is science, says that to get the result you want, these are the methods. Go away and do them. No. If you then look at, as I did, out of sheer curiosity, which was aroused for lots of reasons, and I found that I was being offered something that, if I did, would take me further in that direction to find something. I knew not what, didn't even have a suspicion. But each and every step took me to something that was that. It was pointing to it. So really, when the methodology is being offered and it's not acted upon, then it's not a failure of the method from whichever discipline it comes. It's a failure of lack of application. And that must be made clear. I am not anti-science. I am a scientist. I come from an engineering background. So was my father, by the way. And I think my grandfather worked in the railways. Yes, he did. So it's all those things, regardless of which discipline one comes from, if whatever is offered, if you don't make the cake mixture in the right way, you're not going to get the right cake. It's as simple as that. And you can dispute, make all sorts of disputations about anything, including saying things like you can't prove a negative. And I don't know what else has come up today. And I think that a lot of the stuff that comes up is just for argument's sake. Oh yeah, I'll make the other point a little bit clearer as well, if I may. Winning. The only time that's come up for me is today, about this post that I put up. And it wasn't anything to do with anything. All I gave to Colin was a method of following a thought through. Nothing else. And I could say, and probably it's asking for trouble, is that he attaches too many elements together and confuses himself. He has not learned to follow a thought in a linear fashion. Complexity arises from taking simple things, bolting them together, and producing something which is complex and balanced and works well. That's how life systems came about. The initial life systems were not complex. They gave rise to complexity. So if we don't understand these simple terms, we're not going to get very far. It's like we're rewriting a lexicon for the sake of clarity. Every time we have a meeting, we have to clarify what we mean.
So I love the question Stacy put in the chat. So this is all about disappointment. When Sam talks about science relative to disappointment. And the truth of the matter is that scientists experience disappointment. Religious people experience disappointment. You know, all sorts of people with all sorts of belief systems on an experiential level experience disappointment. It's in the eye of the beholder. Now, one person's system is less disappointing for them. Another person's system is less disappointing for them. And let's have a competition as to whose system produces less disappointment. And it does devolve into, you know, how many fairies dance on the head of a pin. At core, experientially, am I in fear and in defense of my beliefs, or am I unattached and open, to Tyra's point, and coming from curiosity? Am I coming from openness without any like particular pull or attachment to any of these? What's wrong with recognizing all of them without introduction or addition of relativism, of one being better than another, or worse than another, or righter than another, or wronger than another? What about just being open to and recognizing all of them as different languages? You know, English has words, math has numbers and symbols. Like, they're just different languages. They're symbolic representational frames for expressing things through a particular means. Doesn't make one better than another. When an artist paints a painting, they're doing no different with colors on canvas. It's just a different language. So why the driver and the need and the imperative to trump one over another, to always end up in a competitive frame of mine, not yours? What was the Dr. Seuss one with the ones with the symbol and the ones without? What were they called? It's always my favorite Seuss book. I can't remember. But what if, just from a paradigm shift standpoint, that competitive dynamic was taken out of the equation? And all of it was respected, all of it was embraced, recognized as products of human creativity and generativity, pure and simple. And none of them invalidate any others, none of them trump any others, that it's just an array. And start from there and see where we go. And what do we want to do? And that just seems just infinitely more generative, infinitely more productive. Because all the stuff about defining terms and about, mine is bigger, is just that. It's a way of keeping us out of the generative sweet spot of collectively and collaboratively projecting or creating or expressing or enacting a new and better us in the world, and a new and better world by our hand, and keeps us sort of at each other's throats. Doesn't make sense to me. I'm complete. Colin.
Thanks for that question. That is the ultimate question. Why? Why the conflict? Why the division? Why does science versus religion have a stamp on somebody's mind that when I say I don't want to talk about it, they still think I want to talk about it? Like, what are these memes that pull us into this? Well, what it is context. If you have a context, Doug, of how you present your worldview and your way of dealing with rationality, then that's fine. I can follow you there and use your terminology and try to find how that relates to me, until it doesn't, for some reason. And then I can question. And I think that's what Sam was saying. Until I find some reason that I think that idea might let me down, I might just put it in the, oh, that's interesting pile, I didn't know that, and keep collecting these things. But there are some contexts that add an extra level of realism. And religion is an example of that, where you have two opposing religions. I like to think about everybody in the church are nice people and wouldn't want to hurt anybody. So if, one church had a plumbing problem, they could go over to the other church. That would be great. But I don't suspect that is the way it is. That's why they have different churches in the first place. So why did they divide? What are those terms? Well, that's the thing we are trying to highlight, and as sensitively and as necessary as the context gives us. So that is why I don't want to bring up science and religion as a context for our conversations, because right now it's not a problem. I don't see the problem. We're not talking about, putting textbooks into Texas schools. And we're not rewriting creationism manuals for schools. We're not voting on something like, I think Jazz was saying they wrote him letters to vote on certain things, and he mentioned education. So if we're talking about education and they're talking about bringing in, what if the Muslims win the war and we all have to start, saying prayers 5 times a day? Are we going to be down with that? right? Like, is that a new flow that we're just going to look at the complexity and say, well, I guess it's 5 times a day now? So that's where the complexity comes from. It comes from context. And I am in search of the context to try to ground the conversation. And I will squeak and whine and squeal every time context seems to float away like a balloon. And I will ask. And if I seem like I'm causing trouble to the flow of the conversation, then, you know, that's something I have to take from feedback from people. But if I'm trying to bring something to the conversation, which is context, then I hope I'm useful in some conversations. Maybe in some conversations, there's just sorrow and sadness and pain. And all you can do is be there for the person. And I think religion has really played a useful role in that place. I don't want to get into the capacities of people's worldviews. You know, some people don't even know what math is, I suppose. But to ask me what science is to ask me what math is. So do I want to sit here and have what I consider a conversation with people who know I know what science is and just want to see me squirm in my version? I think it's more interesting is, why is science important? And science is important for what Sam was saying. That it disappoints you less, and it's got that predictability to it. It worked before, it'll probably work again. Where if we all get together and pray for an outcome, you know, there's been studies of people who really believe that would happen. And they said, okay, well, we're going to do a study and watch how prayer works. Everybody gather around. And guess what? It didn't come out that way. So people who truly believe, you know, they went and looked for the ark. Well, okay, well, I know it's there. Let's go find it. It's like they didn't find it. You know, I commend them for doing that. Looking for the ark is not a problem. Praying for somebody's health is not a problem. Closing their mind and saying that we're going to control the way you think now, that's a problem. So that's why, Doug, it's when somebody says you must think this way. So you're free to think as open about traveling through your life as you want. But as soon as the group gets down to a particular topic and context, you might say, you know, this is different. This particular topic's different. Let's, you know, roll up our sleeves and get into the meat of this. So I would find it very useful for as a group discussing when we know we're at that 30,000 foot level where everything's general and we're trying to steer humanity, or where we're actually talking about someone's specific problem and, you know, and how we map and track that. And I predict if we're even kind in a way that we totally don't want to play mind games with the other people, which, you know, Jazz has self-admitted that he likes to do that, and sometimes it pushes my buttons. I suggest doing it less. If he wants to do it, go to it, as long as you back it up while you're doing it. Something could be learned. It's the times he doesn't back it up and just leaves me hanging like some Indian guru, like I'm supposed to come to some major conclusion. I don't think it's there. And not underscoring it for me, I think, is doing me a disservice. Think I can't think linearly, I think, is a big mistake. In fact, I think so linearly, I need graphs to keep the line straight, right? But only when it's important and in a certain context. And the graph on the back there is the conversation we had yesterday. And it starts off to say, what are we going to talk about? What's this conversation even about? And then you go down and it says, well, what would I like to talk about? Right? So I would have to ask the group, can I talk about that? That whole map behind me right there kind of lays out the context of how we get into these rabbit holes. And, you know, what are things that are impassable things that we can't get past? And Doug's saying, well, why do we have these impassable things? Well, I don't know. Let's put a couple on the map and discuss it. Like, they're there. The impasse for Doug and Sam was recently about the word agreement. Well, I think the word was just the syntax of it, but what they meant behind that is important. So what the science of the word agreement is one thing, but what does it mean to Doug, the science of the word agreement? And what does the science of the word agreement mean to Sam? And can they come to some meeting of the minds? And I think they came to a word that they like better called, what was it, Doug?
Consensus.
No, it was like a
Mindfulness.
understanding, a memorandum of understanding almost is how I
Clarity,
remember it.
yeah. Clarity and foresight.
It wasn't an agreement. It wasn't a contract. It was a memorandum to understand each other, from what I understand.
Insight and learned from hindsight gives you foresight.
So I think if I used my map and picked a couple of different groups of people and said, let's try to understand each other, once they finally steel man each other's positions, they may be very upset with one another. It might not bring unity. So in there is the key to truly understand what the other person says. And if we don't have open minds to think about what might be better, which is one of those squirmy words, like what is better is different for you than me. You know, I look to humanism because atheism doesn't say anything. Atheism is like science. It doesn't really have an opinion. It just says, I don't think that that's going to work. Try it. It won't work. And atheism's like, well, you could try to pray, but I don't think it's going to work. And if you don't think praying is going to work for you, then you're an atheist. Simple. If you think that praying is going to work for you, then you're a believer in something. It's that simple. But atheism isn't going to tell me, you know, what kind of butter to buy. Right? That would be humanism to tell me that I don't want to buy butter from the cows that were abused. So anyway, I'll end it there. Thank you.
But Alex, you're next, and I just want to mention that we're coming to the top of the hour. It's sort of been, I don't know why, but for me, this has been really fast.
Yeah.
Like faster than normal.
Well,
and so comments from this point forward, let's have them be final and closing. And generally, all that means is don't use final comments and contributions as bases for continuing to play tennis. So each person has their say, and then the next person has their say, whether they're referential or not, and that we get to a completion point. So with that, Alex.
okay, this cake we're making has a list of ingredients, and I think we can get that together without having to reference the division caused between the three different politics, science, and religion, because in the center of that triangle is where they converge, and if we focus, get some clarity there, we've got a chance to make progress. And people who drag us to one of the corners with this argument about who's right and who's wrong are basically not the type of contributors you want around in an organisation that's trying to achieve something. Over.
I'll give my closing comments. I just lost my train of thought. So I think that we're all born with like a scientific mind, and that's like the curiosity that Tyra was mentioning. The issue that I have, and sometimes, and Colin, this has to do with you, is because when you say something to assume that there's no validity in something because it hasn't been proven, sometimes there hasn't been any attention to try and prove it. And so if we shut out certain voices, certain questions won't even come up. So as Sam mentioned, certain things have been examined, maybe not so much here, but elsewhere, that would lead to what you were saying, Doug, about whether or not our consciousness affects what's manifested, you know, collectively. So again, when I was raised, when I learned about science, what was really clear to me is that there was no definitive for forever and ever and ever and ever. It was just until the next thing came up that might have, you know, said, wait a minute, but it doesn't work in this case. And when that happened, you didn't throw everything out. You looked to see, well, what's different here? Why in this case does it not work? And that's where the attention was focused on. And so to me, there's a very big difference between the scientist and science. And I get riled up when somebody tries to convince me and tell me science proves, because I mean, don't get me wrong. I definitely think if something doesn't work within a scientific model, then I look and I say, well, wait a minute, what's wrong here? And I usually go back and I look at what the experiment was and what the variables were and the controls and all that. But to just say, well, this proves it, and not pay attention to anything else that may or may not contradict, I think is a big mistake that we make. And so with that, I'm complete for now.
That's 2 triggers.
In who? You or me?
Alex and Stacy. I didn't say that science proves anything. I would say, if I did say prove, in the sense it shows it's reliable. And if it becomes unreliable, you're right. I was saying that
Colin,
science leads on. Yeah.
Colin, we're in closing mode, which means no.
Well, she kind of said I said science knows everything, and I don't know why people hear that.
Okay, I'll just pose a question here as a closing statement. And the question is sort of kind of like, religious people study science and practice science. The majority of scientific people don't. Very few are religious or study religion. It's dismissed out of hand. And yet both have methodologies. So why does the clever man pick up the rucksack rather than the parachute? That's what I want to know. I'm complete.
Sam?
Sorry, I was dealing with my dog, so I've not been here for the last 15 or 20 minutes, I think. But I'm not going to respond to Jaswinder since this is checkout. But I would like to offer the following, and it is not original to me, but it is that there are many phenomena that religion used to explain that now science explains in a deeper, more understanding way. We're still in pursuit of those phenomena that science used to explain that religion can now explain in a deeper, more understanding way. I don't claim that there are none. I'm just saying there aren't as many that I can recount. So if we had that pursuit, I think that would be a worthwhile pursuit. Over.
Ira? Oh, you're muted.
Well, I just wanted to say that I have a lot of gratitude that where we are right now with technology, that we can have these conversations. You know, we have the ability to Zoom and connect with people all over the world. We have access to so much information. And I love that I can explore any subject I want. I can interpret it any way I want. And I think that's just incredibly exciting. And that we also live in a time where we are individually, that we can actually question religion without persecution. We can question science without ridicule. And to me, science is always theory. They might prove something, but then shortly thereafter, it might be disproved. So to me, science, like psychology, is all, in my opinion, theory. So I'm just really grateful that we get to have these conversations and also be able to communicate about some really touchy stuff. That's all I have to say, and I hope everybody has a good rest of their Sunday.
Dove, you're muted.
Not anymore. So I don't want to say anything about science and religion. I want to say something about this exchange. My feeling is that this forum is a laboratory, if you want, science, not science, to try and see how we can enhance communication in the world. And I feel that, and it's not the first time, but like today I felt it, how there is a lot of miscommunication, misunderstanding, misalignment that during the time that I was here, I didn't see come into a resolution, which fills me with sort of sadness, because if here, where I assume we're all sort of like-minded people, we don't manage to use this time to have empathy, to have alignment between this group, to have some common understanding. How do we want to pay it forward? How do we want to make it spread if in this microcosmos we don't yet know how to do it? So this is a very subjective view, which has a lot to do with my personal life currently. So nothing is the absolute truth, and this statement is, of course, is part of it. Thanks a lot. This I'm complete.
Kayla? Oh, we're
I
not
can't
hearing
hear
you for some reason. You're not on mute, but we're not hearing you for some reason. I don't know why.
That was weird.
So,
Yeah,
Now we
now
can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Now we can.
Whatever you did, now we can hear you.
no, just listening as usual. I think everybody kind of spoke about what I was going to say. So, thank you.
Alex G?
It's a it's a lot to unpack. I think I don't think anything was unblocked. I mean, it seems like every week it's the same things and people aren't unblocking things. And I wonder why it seems so impersonal. Like, I mean, I'm not talking about someone feeling attacked or that kind of personal thing. I mean, like where it was mentioned, like how come, like why, to me, unblocking, what blocks me are personal obstacles in my everyday life, you know, psychological things, emotional things, spiritual things, things that I come face to face with that really block me. And that's what I want to help with. That's what I want to talk about, to try to get through those blocks. I find it repetitive to like have this same discussion over and over again and not take advantage of the unblocking, because it was said in a recent video that I watched of a Zoom call where, like, the deep dives, if people did the deep dive on this topic and they said everything that they had to say, then why did they come back at the next week and have to say the same thing all over again? So I was just, that's all I want to close with, is an idea of, if you're going to unblock, then fix the leak in the leaky faucet and get on with the next block. Like that's all. I don't mean it in a mean way. I'm not criticizing everyone for the way that they behaved or anything. It's just, that's just what came up. So with that, I'm complete.
Colin, you want your final bite of the apple? Please make it concise.
Yeah, I haven't seen Alex in a while, and I like it when he participates. Some people participate more online than they do in video, so it's good to see, you know, people come around. So thanks for coming, Alex. Yeah, there is a certain amount of variability that what might happen at unblocking. So I think one week could be different than the next, but your point about deep dives and why do people keep repeating things, I think that's a lament of mine and many others as well. I think it's a matter of not focusing on your message and preparing it, getting it ready, honing it, basically tending to your garden, and thinking that if you come here and say it, it'll grow. I think you actually have work to do and bring that work here. That's my impression. For my type of work, things I try to achieve. I don't know if that's the same for everybody else. I'm not going to judge how other people do their work. But in the end, it comes down to context with me. And if you don't know what you're working on or what the topic is, what do you expect? And if you don't have a topic or context, you can say everybody can just hold hands and get along. But as soon as you grab a context, like a personal issue that matters, like, I keep going to religion, not saying religion is a problem here. I like it more as an example because it's history and it shows us things of these types of conflicts where people thought they knew what was better, because we're looking for what's better. So yeah, there's a lot of conflict when you get down to the nuts and bolts of things. And I think the underlying thing I want to do is find the balance of how we can treat that respectively. And as Sam said, learn to disagree better, learn to agree better. How do we coexist? I'm sure I'm not going to convince you all of what I believe, right? So what do I believe or know that's important that I should share with you, Jazz says. Well, I'm thinking, just us trying to understand each other is a good start. And that means, I think, sticking a bit to what it is you want to say and refining that message. So, one of the things I've been doing is finding gems. So if anybody has any gems that they've heard anybody else say, and they don't know how to clip them out, and they want me to do it, then, send me a message with the date of the video, a link to the video and the timestamp and what you'd like done. And I think it's good that we do that for each other. And I think that would help consolidate some of the conversations that are meaningful to us, that are important to us. And maybe other people could bring what's important to them, and definitely get away from philosophy for the sake of philosophy, talking about religion and science for the sake of a philosophical conversation. I like that conversation, but I do think you're right, Alex, it's wasted here, unless that is the particular topic of the day. So we have to have a way to challenge each other's claims without getting into a big, well, let me explain to you how the world started conversation. And if that how the world started conversation is important, then where could we grow that? Because I don't think it's here, unless you want to just give somebody 5 shows in a row. And I'd love to see those 5 shows, but not here. How can we help them make it? That's kind of what's important to me. Like, how do we help each other be better understood, which I call steel manning each other. Not saying what somebody should believe or what they shouldn't do. But if you do cross what I consider is good, I hope I have the courage to say, I don't think that's good. Why is that good? Why is that technique good? Why should I care? I don't think that's selfish. I think that's sense making. So anyway, thank you very much, Doug, and everybody.
So
You're muted, Stacy.
I realize that. I was just thanking Colin for the offer to put out those gems for us.
Alex, I am of your church in terms of unblocking being something living, experiential, emotional, and to a certain extent, I have a harder time staying in the attentional game when things go to the abstract and the intellectual, and leave that connectivity behind. It's much more exhausting to stay attentionally present and listening for me. Dove, you sort of hit the nail on the head. I don't have sadness attached to what appears to be the inability to get to a transcendent place by and between the folks here for all the time and the years and the convenings that we've had, to leave behind the competitive, oppositional stuff, to just sort of like get above that, and start from a new kind of connection and cohesion first, and then feeling into and formulating from that place on an emergent basis. So I am experiencing, like, there are certain groups and activities I'm involved with where I am experiencing that. So hopes, keep the faith. I keep the faith, and I'm gonna keep showing up and doing this, because I believe we can get there. Not that I can prescribe or define how, nor would I even begin to attempt to. So with that, I'm complete, and I turn you all over to your Sundays, and Alex your Monday, and live well and stay safe. And thank you for being here and for co-creating this. I still think it's an unprecedented commitment by everybody that shows up here to something beyond our event horizon that we can, we can't necessarily express or define or describe, but everybody knows there's something there. Sam?
Two things. I'm willing to leave this session open for as long as people want to stay. That's point number one. Up until about 4 hours, because after 4 hours, YouTube says, hey, I'm not going to produce a transcript for you. And so I'd rather YouTube produce a transcript automatically rather than me having to do extra steps. Second, I heard you respond to Alex, so I thought I'd respond to you at this point, which is, in the brief moments that I was here, I myself didn't hear a lot of competitive posturing. I heard people really wanting to understand each other and leaning into what is true. So I'm not sure that was what you intended or implied, but I thought I heard that there was still this competitive phenomenon going on here. And I just wanted to say that I didn't see it here today. I hear it in other conversations we have in GCC, but not today.
So as a former teacher, I think about Jazz and Colin, and if they were in my classroom, I'd have you guys do a project together. Because I think you guys are a lot alike in many ways. I think you each have powerful minds and are very. So anyway, I just am using myself like, what kind of project would I design for Colin and Jazz to do together? But I guess this is the project. The group is the project. The ability to communicate and express our thoughts, and most of all, be heard. I think each one of us, we just want to be heard and figure out how to articulate our own thoughts in the moment. So I appreciate everybody showing up for that.
I have an idea for a project.
Yeah, I'm thinking song and dance.
Yeah, a duet.
So my project is to have them both for one talk in the voice of the other.
I actually suggested a project that would be better than our bickering because it relates to what my message is here. It's as simple as that. See you, Doug. And that would be to, if Jazz has a lot of things he would like to say, how do we produce it? And I offered the same thing today. If he's already said them, and you've heard them, then please send me the timestamps of the video so I can clip them out. And, you know, we can work at this as a team. I think it is important to look back at what we said and harvest and refine what we said. We don't need to keep repeating the same things. What we need to do is highlight them and make them relevant, I think, if they are relevant. Not everything has to be relevant. Not every unblocking has to be the same. Depends on the person. But yeah, that would be the project with me and Jazz, because my frustration with Jazz is it seems like he has so much to tell me and wants to teach, and I'm not even sure I want to sign up for the class, but I definitely like the idea of producing that class so other people could take it, right? Which is a strange way to look at it. I'm interested in his message going out, but not necessarily because of the message, because it's important to him. So if it's important to him, then unless there's no reason, as Sam says, to get any disappointment from that, why not go for it? But I will get disappointment if I sidetrack myself around and around in circles and spend all my time in miscommunication with Jazz. So that I don't want to continue. So I think that's a heart of the problem, miscommunication. And that comes from having, I think, big stories to relate, coming from a little bit different worldviews, not a whole lot actually. And yeah, go ahead, Sam.
I didn't want to interrupt you, so please finish. I just wanted to register my intent to speak.
Yeah, and as well, I was going to relate to other people that have different projects here. For example, Alex has got his hand up. He has a project that he really believes in. Whether I believe in it or not is not whether I should decide that I shouldn't give him my skills and help him relay that information. So what I offer to Jazz, I offer to Alex as well, as much as I can help with the time that I have. But to try to shove that knowledge down my throat is the wrong way to approach me. Because I already have my own beliefs and my own way of approaching how much time I have to question these things. That's why I suggest if I commit to a side channel to do a meditation for 10, 20 minutes, I committed to that. You should take me at my word and do that. I mean, I think you know what I mean, Jess. I did feel like sometimes we could do better to come to these coexistence agreements so that it's not just one person dominating what must be done. Terms must be negotiated for time and effort and space. As Heiner says, voices, spaces, and futures. That's what I'm into, understanding these things. And how to make it interesting so other people want to get involved in it. And not have 3-hour videos that nobody can find any information in. Like, how do we bring the cream to the top if there is some cream here? And I think it's around coexistence and understanding each other so that you can tell them exactly why you disagree with them or agree with them as much as possible, and why it may or may not be useful in this context. Not just generalize and say, oh, there's a reason for everything. That one drives me nuts. Anyway, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
See you soon. Bye.
I'm just going to make one more final contribution before I sign out, and that is, as I was leaving to deal with the dogs, I heard Doug talk about scientists being disappointed. And I wanted to say this to Doug, but hopefully I'll get it on the recording. And that is, yes, scientists are people. Yes, they get disappointed. But what disappointed them? Was it the science or was it misplaced expectation? I really think that's an important question. Because to say scientists are disappointed as a way to say, oh, well, science still leads to this disappointment is a mischaracterization. I just want to go on record with that. Over.
I see these things happening in both camps. Religious people getting disappointed too and leaving the faith. But the thing is, if you can live and let live, you have an opportunity to drop these divisional conflicts between ideologies. And that's because intuitively we can tell if somebody's trying to divide us with a wedge, with a tactic of disruption, division and conflict. But intuitively we can also see that the group consensus is the need to make progress and to focus and get clarity on where we're going, why we're going there. So this is where I'm focusing. Over.
Why does science disappoint? Sam, you're quite right. Science does not disappoint. Manipulated science disappoints. Anything that's manipulated out of shape will disappoint. Okay. Now, I've been sitting here quietly for, again, a considerable length of time. There was a Friday, Colin turned up to the appreciative method, at the end of which we did a 10-minute, just sitting quietly. The following day, Saturday, Colin, in the due course of conversation, said that he really enjoyed that. And he did some on that Saturday and it was good for him. And since that Saturday, he hasn't approached me to do anything with it, although he keeps saying that that's my responsibility. He hasn't said that he's done any more. And he keeps telling me that if I have things that I really want to teach or put forward, he's willing to help. If he really enjoyed that session, why is he being so derogatory that I forced it on him? Is it because I insisted we do it there and then, other than setting it up at another time, which probably would never happen? Or to go to another channel? No, we could have lost the channel, we could have mismatched.
My word means nothing.
Technology does fail.
Not that badly.
And then one of his most annoying factors is that he does this, he keeps jabbing in.
Well, you asked a question, I can answer it if you want. And then you go to the next point, if you like, because it seems like we're back at it.
Well, Colin, if you don't make accusations, I wouldn't have to answer. And it's not just you make it one accusation, this is several.
That's fair, let's back up. So what happened was, as Jazz says, we got to the end of the conversation, and I'm not sure, but I think he said, just try it, or I don't think you could do it. He definitely challenged me to do it. And I said I would, but we're on somebody else's account. Why don't we make it a private call and we'll do it together? I said, give me 5 minutes, because we just had a long call, and we'll connect again. And I don't know anybody I've said that to. I don't, or you could find out that technology has failed me in that commitment. It usually happens. And if you think that the next 5 minutes was the only opportunity in the world for us to do that, then I think that was bullying me to do it there and then, even when I suggested something else. So yeah, that was a bit presumptuous that, you know, you forced me into it. And, you know, I almost didn't agree, but I did because I agreed, not because I really wanted to experience it, but because I just wanted to shut you up about saying that I couldn't do it and that I wouldn't take 10 minutes. I take a lot of time to do a lot of things that are less valuable than sitting and meditating. So you know what? Why don't I do this with Jazz? I think before I've mentioned that I think I do have my own form of meditation, and I don't have to sit quietly with my eyes closed to achieve it. Sometimes it's when I'm taking a shower. Like there's many times, you know, to say I don't think is ridiculous. To say that I don't know how to deeply appreciate is ridiculous. Wipe my mind and think about nothing, I don't do that too often. I think that's what I use sleep for. So there's many things I could learn. Many things I could learn. But to be forced to do it is not the way to learn it. So yeah, that was what I was talking about. And the fact that you wouldn't take my word to give me 5 minutes to come back and do it where we both agreed to it, I think that was the worst part. So, you know, you say you blame technology, you come up with all these excuses, but you're ignoring the other person who is me. And yeah, so if you could explain to me why we can't schedule a meeting at a certain time and do something that I agree to, then there's not a whole lot we can do together. You are forcing the event. And if you don't see that, I guess that's as far as I can take you with this conversation.
Okay.
Actually, there is some more. There is some more I can say.
How do you want to move forward from here?
Oh, well, I think the way I want to move forward from here is the same way with everybody. What I would like to do is keep things within context. And if it doesn't relate to me and it's not something that I have anything in, then I shouldn't really have much of an opinion. If somebody wants to come on to Unblocking and talk about the problems that they've had with their church and all the religion and the pastor, and they're doing all this, and every time they pray, this doesn't work, and I'm just going to sit back and let it all happen. It's got nothing to do with me. But as soon as they say, and we tried to get the education system to adopt creationist view of the world in the science books, then I might say, oh, are you serious? Like, what was that you said? Where was that? Like, I might go look it up. I might be interested for a second because it actually affects my life, or what I would think is going in a bad way. So maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but that's for me to learn. But that's a side point. The point about the meditation and whether I enjoyed it or not, I don't think I really did enjoy it. And what I was really looking forward to was for what you were going to say next after we finished. And we did finish, and we sat there looking at each other for, I would say, 3 to 4 minutes. It seemed like an eternity, and I'm waiting for you to say something, and then all of a sudden the video just ends. Gertrude closes the channel. And so any value or teaching that you could have gave me was gone. And then you never followed up. So you just left me there hanging again, like as if the fruit is going to drop from the super magic olive branch or something. I don't know. So, you know, it's not for me to follow up on why the teacher asked me to sit there quietly for 10 minutes and then just disappear. And, you know, I can find other ways for disappointment than that. What do you think? So how do we move forward? Respect each other. Don't assume that each other's out to get each other, and stop playing mind games. Like if I ask you about a post that you put up twice now and you've got no reply, how should I take that? Don't ask you about posts, just ignore what you do? Should that be the way I move forward? Just ignore what you do because you're going to either take it wrong or go on some diatribe, or like, how do I manage a conversation? Like, I waited forever for you to finish, and I know I do the same thing. So, you know, pot kettle, but we should learn better to keep it shorter and let the other person get in. So I'll do that and let you get in now. What do you think? Do you understand what I'm saying and why I'm saying it?
No.
Well, I'm saying it because it's the way I feel. I feel you let me down when you, first of all, forced me to do something, didn't look for an alternative, didn't trust my word that we could have an alternative, and then once it was over, there was no follow-up. So that's not.
Why didn't you follow it up?
I think I've mentioned it 4 or 5 times, Jazz, and I
still don't know why is it that you feel it's my responsibility.
Well, maybe not. That's fine. If you're following up and telling me that was it, sorry, that's it. Like, enjoy, and I go, okay.
No. You're still putting the onus on me that I should tell you something.
Yes, tell me.
I was waiting for a response from you, which I had in the middle of somebody else's conversation, and I didn't hear anything after that. You didn't come back to me in chat or anywhere and say, oh, I like that. I'd like to do it again. When can we do it again?
Oh, expectations. Well, I think my expectations are that I do have a way of calming my own mind. That's a secondary way of doing it. It's an option.
No, you're deviating.
But I don't really
deviating. The question is quite simple. This is one of your biggest letdowns. You know, it's like saying, it's like, analogy is, we go out for dinner together. It's a superb dinner. And the next day, you're telling everybody, it was a superb dinner. And then, you're telling me, you forced me into that dinner. Why did you do that?
Yes, why?
You know, you enjoyed something, then the next step is, if you
How do you know
enjoyed
I enjoyed
something
it? How do you
and
know?
you intimated
know I
more than once that you want a follow-up, but you want me to come in, Colin,
It was okay. It wasn't
did you
super.
really like that session? Was it good for you? Would you like to do it again?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, I'm not sure.
No, you
where I'm
missed
gonna
the
make the time
point
to do it.
again.
I don't know if I got the time to do it.
You missed the point again, is that you're putting the responsibility on me.
No, I could
You're a
do it.
very difficult person,
Hold on.
and you make that accusation of everybody else, including me.
Let me straighten this out, because this is so far sideways.
No, there's nothing to straighten out. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Every time it's a simple question, you complicate it by going round in circles and circles, and you go for as far back as that
Is it a
post.
circle to ask you why we did that? Why did we do that?
And then you take it right back to that far back as that post.
Let's just
But
stick
wait a
to
minute.
the facts. Let's just stick to the facts. Why did you get me to do it?
No. What do you mean stick to the fact? This is a fact.
This is your
The
interpretation.
fact is that
What?
I'm just bringing about what Kira said, is that I should take your position. And your position is always to make accusations,
No, defend.
regardless of which. You
Defend
accuse
something I don't
me
understand.
of not explaining things to you many times, including going right back to nearly 3 years
Who
with
asked
that
you?
post of that nice young lady
Who
who
asked you?
came. Sorry?
Who asked you to explain it to me? Remember Lucy talking about feeding people sandwiches?
You did. You keep saying to me, and you say to me in conversation
When
that
did
you
I ask
still
you to
want
teach
to
me to
you still
meditate?
want to have a resolution about the conversation that that Doug and Sam had, and you're still not happy about that. There are so many things that you keep mentioning, and I'm coming to the conclusion you're running on automatic. You pack these away in there, and then you just
back away.
dump
Let's
them
back
out,
away from automatic. Let's back
and
away.
you don't even know what you're saying
Okay, thank you for all
because
the
you
criticism.
deny it.
No, let's get back to the point, because I'm not going to be offended by what you say, because that's your impression. What I want to do is be clear. You said to me that you had something you wanted me to try. You offered that to me. It didn't come from somebody else. So I had an option to say, do I want that product or not? And why would I want that? Well, do you think I don't know how to meditate? Or do you have a special way that I can meditate better? Hold on, I'm not done. I'm not done.
All that, you keep repeating the same stuff.
That's the whole point.
It's really annoying that you don't move forward. The move forward here
You ditched me. You ditched me.
You ditched me.
That's
You're
what
a loony.
now we're getting somewhere. So we think we ditched each other. Isn't that miscommunication?
It's nothing to do with me.
Why not?
You since that Friday, how many times have you been back to the appreciative method?
Why do I need to?
Because the Friday following, Gertrude did a 10-minute silent session. Or it might have been 2 weeks later. But you see, Gertrude is also doing similar things. So if something worked for you, it's like you're going to an ice cream parlor and they've got a new flavor and you try the new flavor and then you say you don't do anything and you go back to the ice cream parlor and say, well, really, you should have done something to get that new flavor back up to me, and I'm really disappointed you haven't.
Well, okay, I'm sensing from you that I owe you some kind of follow-up from the gift.
No, you are accusing me of not following it up. Whether you want to follow up or not,
I'm not accusing you. I'm noticing. Like you didn't even type me a message, even after I messaged you. Like, what's that about?
You did not message me at all about that session.
You can say whatever you like. You could have said, "Oh, that's fine. I'll look at that." How
We
did
can
you like?
check
To
back. We can check back in the messenger to see if you.
Why don't we
did
do it now? Why don't we do it now? I still feel the same
Go
way.
ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So,
Show it to me.
so this is how I feel. I feel like you did.
No,
forget
no,
that.
no. Stop that. Stop
No,
that. Go
let's
back
pick
on.
up. Let's pick up.
Bring up
So I
Facebook.
agreed. So I agreed.
Go back into
to-
Messenger.
I agreed.
Find where you've said to me
Oh
that
my
you
God.
want another session, or that you didn't like it, or that you did like it.
I'm not
Where
signed up
is
for
the
your class.
follow-up from that Friday?
Who thinks that I'm signed up for your classes? I don't.
You just made a statement that you wanted a follow-up, and you put it into chat, messenger chat.
I didn't want to follow. I want to
You
follow.
just said that.
Like, for example, like how Sam does the focus groups, and then the last half hour we do a follow up. We don't do it over
Nothing to
again.
do with that. It's quite simple.
I want to
You
know why
can't-
we did it.
I accused you today of that you can't do a linear conversation.
Or I couldn't
But
sit for
you
10
can't-
minutes to meditate.
You can't stick to one point. You bang everything together that you can,
I'm sticking to our session
and then you
with
put
Bertram.
the
You brought it
onus
up.
on the
You
other
brought it
person.
up. Where are you going? Where are you going with
Where are
this?
you going? I
I'm
want
going
to
back to the
know
event. I'm going back to the
where
event.
you get off making all these accusations.
This is what I'm saying. I don't even consider them accusations. I call them observations. The observation is I had, after agreeing to the terms that you put out, that I couldn't adjust due to our.
I didn't give you any terms. All I said was,
I gave
do
terms.
a 10-minute
I gave
silence.
terms. I
Show
gave
me
terms.
you can do a 10-minute silence. And I challenge you
Which
to
is,
do
which
a
is also
10-minute silence.
disrespectful. Which is also
Okay.
disrespectful.
Now, yesterday, you said you don't even
That's-
like a
I'm just going to
2-minute
say. I'm
silence.
just going to say. I'm going to end this conversation because I feel you're not respecting me. All right.
I'm not, you're absolutely right, I'm not.
Okay. Well, then we're done. Because if you don't
Because
respect
you
me,
don't respect
I
anybody's
don't want to
wishes.
talk like this.
You
I
don't
don't want to
listen
look like
to
this. I
anybody.
don't want to feel like this.
And if they do something good for you, you
How do you
turn
know?
that around in that, I didn't want it in the first place, but I enjoyed it.
I didn't say that. I said I might.
Oh,
have said
yes,
it
you
okay.
did. On
might
the
have said it was
Saturday
okay. It was
following, on the Saturday following, you were
I didn't put
absolutely
it this way.
excited.
Put it this way. I might have
that
been
for
being
the
nice.
first time in your life, you've done a 10-minute meditation, and you used that word.
Excuse
I
me.
used the word silence.
First of all, you don't know me. You already said you don't know me because I don't tell you about my personal life, and then you go make.
I've never said I don't know you.
You don't know how much I've meditated. You don't even know how long I've been silent. You have
You
no
keep saying
idea.
that you said that before the meditation, and it wasn't a meditation, it was just silence. That
do
was not a meditation session.
Well, that's
A
fine. Then
meditation
okay,
session
hold on.
is different.
Would you stop fighting with me and get
You
down?
stop fighting with me.
Then answer my
That's the
question.
whole point.
Then
You
answer my
always
question.
want the last word, and you're not going to
I don't
get
want
it
the last
today.
word. I want to understand. You're going off somewhere.
You're going off somewhere.
What I want to understand is if you.
I have this conversation with the 8-year-old.
Okay, goodbye, Jazz.
Bye. Are you there, Stacy?